especially with climate change and stuff. So them and a few other companies are sponsoring research on looking at indigenous ways of caring for water. So in Gisborne, where I'm from, up the coast, they don't have a reticulated water system. So you have to get water either brought in or you capture it off your roof. And it costs $600 if you have to get it trucked in. So, but we're quite fortunate in Christchurch because we've got a massive river, the Waimakariri. Actually, we've got a whole load of massive rivers in the South Island, haven't we? Braided rivers where we get a lot of our water from. And I'm stalling a wee bit while this is happening. There it is. Kia ora. Ko tēnei tōku whānau, ko Aidan Harrison aho. So these two places are very special to me. Does anybody recognise where that is? Waitangi, yes. There's been a whole lot of kōrero around that. So a few years ago I took my whānau up to there, to Waitangi, and we visited our marae there. If you haven't got a marae, if you don't whakapapa Māori, have Māori genealogy, then your marae is up there. Does anyone know where that place there is? Yes, that's Oihi Bay, 1814, where Samuel Marsden preached from Luke 2, and we actually did the karakia for it. He honore, he karore ki te atua, he maungarongo ki te whenua, he whakaaro pai ki ngā tangata katoa. And it's what the angels said to the shepherds. Honour and glory to God, peace on earth, goodwill to all men. And you just did that karakia. You can do that karakia anytime you want. In a secular setting, it's actually a way, in some ways, tikanga Māori ways of doing things, is actually upholding Christianity. It's the last bastion of Christianity in a secular sense. So, he pātai.
You said that if we don't have a whakapapa marae,
Yep.
up north, what do you mean by that?
So, Hoenant. Yeah. An Hanama Guinness. So up there is the National Marae, and so that was built in the 60s, I think.
Is it at one?
It's at Waitangi, yeah. So that's your marae. Yep. Have you been up there? No. Who has been to Waitangi? Up there. Awesome. Go again. There's an amazing museum that was built about 5 or 6 years ago, which is pretty amazing. But ko Bridie tēnei, ko ia taku hoa rangatira. This is Bridie. She is my chiefly friend, my hoa rangatira, my friend, my chiefly friend. Ko Josie tēnei, ko ia te mātāmua o te whānau, mātāmua, the oldest, ka pai. Ko Luel tēnei, ko ia te pōtiki o te whānau, ka pai. Ko Holly tēnei, ko Maika tēnei, ko ia taku tama anake. Tama? My son. And Bruce didn't quote it, but it was Tama I roro kutia. That's what te ko in the prophecy. Tama is a son. He's my only son. So yeah, that's a bit about me. I'll get you to click it on. Pause for dramatic effect. God has always been in Aotearoa. Very good, Dallas. Yep, next one. He mea hanga nā te atua e te timatanga, te rangi me te whenua. Ka hore e āhua o te whenua i tā koto kau, he pauri anō ārunga i te mata o te hōhonu. Nā, ka whakapāho te wairua o te atua i runga i te kare o ngā wai, kei Aotearoa. Now, you guys all know this verse. If we go into the next one. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now the earth was formless and empty, darkness was over the surface, some say over the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. And it was happening here in Aotearoa as well. And you've got it written on that psalm over there, which is neat, eh? God has always been here, His Holy Spirit has always been here. This year I'm going to be writing 20,000 words on Jesus and the symbolic use of water that He connects to. And then I'm going to be writing 8,000 words on the Spirit of God hovered over the face of the waters. There's something special about water in the Bible. And I don't think it's a mistake that the word wairua, the two waters, was the name that the missionaries were easily able to slot in to being the Holy Spirit. Wairu, the two waters. And I'm going to have to just leave you hanging there because this is not meant to be a seminar and we could spend a whole lot of time on that. But yeah. So Te Reo Māori, it's the language of this whenua. Do you know God is fluent in Te Reo Māori? How cool is that? Go and have a kōrero to God, to Jesus in Te Reo Māori. It's the language of this whenua that you call home. Pharmacists in New Zealand now have to show cultural responsiveness, and they actually are they are mandated to speak in Te Reo, to learn Te Reo. That just came out this week. It's the language of this place. It's unique to here. Samoans that are here speak Samoan, but they've got Samoa to go back and speak it here. Māori speak Te Reo here, they can go back. Oh, they can't. This is where it's from. This is where it is. And people love it when I say Hoia Mada to them, or Hoia Nant, because it's in the evening. But when you speak their language, I get in trouble with my kids though, because they're like, oh, don't ask them if they speak another language, Dad. Oh. But when you see a Filipino and you go salam, they love it. You're saying thank you. Next one. God has called you to be a part of his unique story in Aotearoa, New Zealand. And I'm going to come back to that little golden thing there. Keith Newman in his books, which we've got at the back there, talks about the golden thread of God. Next one. So Māori came to the North Island in 1250 AD, 1275 in the South Island. Does anyone know where they landed in the South Island? Not here. The Wairau Bar up near Blenheim. They were up there. And they came on these massive boats. And actually there's a series on TVNZ On Demand, Scotty Morrison, looking at how Māori travelled all throughout the Pacific. Do you know that Māori took chickens to South America? And what did they bring back? Kumara, you guys are onto it. That's a little bit blurry, but that's okay. Hopefully you recognise that right now we are about... No, we're about here somewhere. But Dallas acknowledged mana whenua here, Ngai Tuahuriri, who are part of Kaitahu. And before that, there was another iwi here called Kāti Māmoe, who came from Hastings, Heritonga way, and Waitaha came from almost sort of the Tauranga and maybe even the Gisborne area. So those were the iwi that were here over time. And we talked about Tuahiwi. What did we talk about Tuahiwi before? There was a reference to it. Yeah, that's where Ngai Tuahuriri are from. And I want you to remember Kaiapoi. We were talking about how there was a Kaiapoi Waitangi Day celebration. But at Kaiapoi, there used to be a massive pā. 2,000 to 3,000 people there, about 8 hectares inside, so 16 rugby fields at Kaiapoi. Unfortunately, it's not there anymore, and I'll get to that bit of the story. Next one. So Pākehā came here about 1790. And does anyone know the first guys that were in this area? What was their job? The whalers were here. Yep. So the whalers came, and this is a... Does anyone know where this picture's taken? Or not taken, but... I took it the other day, actually. No. Anyone know where this is? Littleton. Yeah, Littleton. Yep. And so they brought with them the potato, the pōaka, and the poo. Now, when I share this with Year 7, 8 students at Middleton Grange, at the end of my little kōrero, I say, now, what did you guys learn today from that? Oh, Mr. Harrison, I learned that the Māori word for gun is poo. Man, is that all you got? But the poo revolutionised, the musket revolutionised how Māori fought. Next one. And the names of the peaks on the Port Hills here are actually named after some of the interactions that those iwi had with each other. So Orongomai here, which is called Cass Peak as well, many years later. That's the one that anyone been to Living Springs? So it looks like the golf ball up on top of the thing. It's the aircraft, whatever it is. But Orongomai is the place where voices were heard. and Kaitahu, who had come down a little bit later, ended up having a fight with some Kati Māmoe. And does anyone know where Moffat's flower place is on your way out there? Yeah. Well, there's actually a massive development going on. There used to be a pā there, a Ngāti Māmoe or Kati Māmoe pā, and that's where they had a fight and they dealt to a whole of them. If you carry on across here, Castle Rock, you carry around to Mount Cavendish. What's at Mount Cavendish? The gondola? Well, the Māori name for that is Te Upoko Ika. Oh, sorry, Te Kite Upoko. Can you point to your upoko for me, please? That's your puku. Your upoko. Your upoko. Does anyone know what a kite is? It's a bag. A bag that's got a whole load of heads in it. I'll let you join the dots as to what was going on there. So maybe some of the relations that they have, if you go to the biblical times, though, there's a bit of that stuff happening too. But I've got to be careful because I don't want to run down my ancestors. And Bruce tried to not do that as well. But I do have ancestry. But stories. I'm inviting you to be part of this story. Ngā kōhatu whakarekereka o Tamatea Pōkai Whenua. The smouldering boulders of Tamatea Pōkai Whenua. Or Port Hills. There's a bit more of a story there, isn't there? The smouldering. I haven't got time to go into that. So, next one. Okay. Hongi Hika. Has anyone heard of Hongi Hika? So, he was the first one to get heaps of muskets. Long story. He got some of them from missionaries. He actually got a whole lot when he went back to England with one of the first missionaries that came here. And he went around the North Island killing and enslaving people and took them back up to Kirikiri. So you had Māori from all over the North Island going up to this place up in Kirikiri. And an interesting point about that was where the missionaries were based as well. So just keep that little fact in your mind. Has anyone heard of Te Rauparaha? Okay. Can everyone say Hongi? Hika. Now, Te Rauparaha. Oh, that's pretty good. You actually know him because the All Blacks do his haka. Ka mate, ka ora, ka ora. That's actually his. Oh man, there's so much I could tell you about him as well. But I won't. But anyway, while Hongi Hika was doing that stuff in the 1820s, he was doing similar stuff in the 1830s. But he did it locally, here. I can't show you all the details, but he killed and enslaved a whole load of people up here, came down to Kaikoura, did the same thing. He stopped there, left his war party there. A few of them came down to Kaiapoipa, trading for greenstone. 9 of his chiefs got killed there, and he took off and went back. But he came back soon after. Next slide. And he came down, it's in the wrong place, but Akaroa. And at Akaroa, next one, he went to a place, that's in the wrong place as well. He went to Takapūneke, which is here. There's the wharf there. And you can walk here. It's probably only about 1 kilometre or 2. He came back here. But what he did was he got an English captain to bring him and about 150 of his warriors down. And he killed a whole lot of people here, and he enslaved the chief, his wife, and his daughter. And he took them up to Kapiti Island. That was in the 1830s. So he took them up to Kapiti Island. And he... I won't go into all the details, but on the way there, the chief and his wife made the decision that they would kill their daughter because they didn't want her to be taken captive and be treated horribly. So that happened here. Akaroa up to Kapiti in 1830. We're talking about James Stephens, Senior and Junior. Well, Te Rauparaha had a son here, and the son was actually he was only about 10 years old when all those slaves were taken up to Kapiti Island. But there was a guy, Octavius Hadfield. Has anyone heard of him? He was a missionary in great demand along the coast here. He ran a school, and Te Rauparaha Junior learnt about the faith. And if we go into the next one. Something amazing happened up here, mid-1820s. If you were a slave in Māori culture, you weren't treated very well. However, the missionaries were there, and they fed them, they clothed them, and they taught them how to read and write. Do you know what they used for their curriculum? Bible. Most of the slaves were more literate than the people who had captured them. However, the missionaries worked with the chiefs, and they also shared the word of God with them. And we talked about God always being here. Those chiefs, look, they must have had a change in their heart. They must have acknowledged that Jesus was Lord. He died for all people, that all people are made in God's image, because they released all of those slaves. They then needed to get the flax, go out and do the fish, clean out the toilets, instead of the slaves doing it. So they released those slaves. Now, I'm from Gisborne, and 3 or 4 years after your family had been decimated or killed, your mum or your dad walks back, and they say, hey, the missionaries have taught our captors, the chiefs who've taken us, they've taught us and they've looked after us, and they've converted, they've changed these guys' thinking. That's why we've been released. Māori actually evangelised Māori better than any of those missionaries that came over, which is kind of cool. Can I go on to the next one? I didn't want this to be too wordy, but there's kind of no way around it. But while that was happening, some of those slaves from Kapiti Island were returned to Port Levy. Has anyone been to Port Levy before? That was actually in 1840, just before the treaty, this was the biggest population in Canterbury of Māori, in Port Levy. They were returned there, those who had survived. This place is called Koko Rarata. Next one. So has anyone heard of the story of Tarore? So she has a connection to us in the South Island. In 1836, when these slaves were being returned, one of Tamihana's relations, who had been taken away as a slave up here, was returning back. As he was returning back, he met up with the guy who had killed Tarore. It was a bit of a case of mistaken identity, but anyway, she was killed. Her father was a Christian, and around her neck she had a copy of the Gospel of Luke. Remember I said that often the slaves were literate, whereas the ones who caught them weren't? This guy had taken the Gospel of Luke. Her killer had taken the Gospel of Luke. He couldn't read it, but one of Te Rauparaha's relations had come back and he read it to her, read it to his killer. And the verse that stuck out was, love your enemy. And the enemy, the guy who killed her, was so convicted that he went back to Tarore's father to ask for forgiveness. Well, the traditional way you ask for forgiveness then, was eye for an eye, blood for blood. But the father said, I forgive you. Amazing example of forgiveness, which ends up being part of our story in the South Island, because that guy who translated the gospel to her killer then came back, connected with his cousin Te Rauparaha, shared the gospel message with him, which led to his father returning the slaves. And that's a cool story in itself, but it doesn't stop there. Next one. Te Rauparaha Jr. then comes down to Akaroa, goes to Moiraki, probably stands on the boulders there, goes to Otago and to a place called Ruapuki Island, sharing the gospel message and asking for forgiveness for what his father's done, at risk to his own life. There are a couple of places there where people are like, well, who's your daddy? Your daddy did this to us. Well, but he didn't. Now, that happened for 18 months until 1843. And then something happened up here in a place called Tuamarina, which is in between Blenheim and Picton. Does anyone know what happened at Tuamarina? The Wairoa Free. Man, these guys know all this stuff already. All I'm doing is just trying to weave these stories all together. Arthur Wakefield was over here, haven't got time to go to New Zealand Company, buying land for settlers who hadn't even left, and different understanding. He came over with a whole lot of people into the Wairoa Valley to dispute land that they had been told it was sold. And there was a fight between Wakefield and Te Rauparaha. Te Rauparaha's daughter was killed. Arthur Wakefield and about 22 of his party were taken captive, and he was going to let them go, but because his daughter was killed, those 22 people who surrendered were all killed. And so you've got Te Rauparaha Jr. with his father now involved in killing a whole load of English people, and so that pretty much ended his mission around the South Island. Next one. I'll let you read that quote. We have an amazing history of Christianity in New Zealand. We also have some really bad, hard things that have happened. But when we know these stories, it just begs a response from us. What am I going to do with this? What does this mean for me? Next one. That might be it. I haven't got time to go into all this, but a bit of a timeline for you from 1826. Ngāi Tahu were fighting in between themselves. Ngāi Tahu were fighting with Te Rauparaha. This is the incident that happened at Akaroa, where you had an English person helping Māori kill and enslave Māori, which essentially led to the missionaries and settlers saying, "You got to sort out your English people over here." The nearest government was 3,000 kilometres away in New South Wales. They made 3 attempts at trying to control their subjects in New Zealand, waste of time. So after you had an Englishman killing and enslaving Māori, they sent over a guy called James Busby to Waitangi in 1833. Some people argue that Takapūneke is the real reason for Waitangi and for the treaty. The New Zealand Declaration of Independence, which Dallas I think is going to touch on a little bit later, is a result of James Busby coming here, working with some of Dallas's whanaunga up there of Ngā Puhi, and they essentially say to the king, "You need to sort out your subjects over here. We want protection from the French, Americans, and there were Germans as well in the Pacific. We want you to acknowledge that we are the sovereign chiefs of New Zealand, and we want you to sort out your people who are here who are raising havoc and who are actually killing and helping Māori kill and enslave Māori." So that was a letter that was sent by James Busby, and Dallas will talk a little bit about that, the New Zealand Declaration of Independence. You've got Tarori in there, and then you've got the Treaty of Waitangi. And after that, you've got Te Rauparaha Jr. in the South Island, and then his dad finishing that off. Now, I know there was so much in there, I'm sorry, but I just had to get those stories out there, because your church, your faith is interwoven in all of this as well. Is there one more after that? There may be. Yeah, so skip that one, because that's what you guys are going to talk about next week, I think. Is there one more? Oh, yeah, skip that. Skip that. Oh, yeah, go back one. Okay. I'm going to get you to, have they got time to go into groups? I'm going to get you to Wānanga. Wānanga means to study something intently, but it's actually you need to participate in it. Have you heard the saying on Air New Zealand? Mā te wā. It's got lots of different meanings, but it means by the time, or it means mā te wā, time will tell. You'll get yours. Mā te wā, or mā te wā, when the time comes, I'll see you again. So to wānanga is to really make the most of the time that you have together. So what I'd love you to do is, here's a statement here, and I won't get you to go right back to that other slide before, but there was a word part that I had, and there was a little gap, golden thread part. Are you a part of God's story in this land, or are you apart from it? It's a little bit of a play on words. If you do a part, then you're separate from it. But if you're a part of it, then you've got that golden thread. You are a part of the story of God's story here in New Zealand. You may not know all the stories, but I've just given you a whole lot of stories about how God has been active in this land and how He's got works prepared in advance for you to do. Here. Your pastor talked about his mum, going back to the States. She did go back to the States, right? She's got work to do there. I'm not going back to the States. I've got work to do here. You've got work to do here, right here. So maybe just have a bit of a conversation. Is that something, are you a child of God? Are you a part of his story in this land? And what about those stories? Is there something that resonated? You're like, oh, yeah, okay. I knew that. I didn't know that. What's your response? Go for it.
just going to have one more minute to do that. We'll move into the next thing. Kia ora. Okay. So the next thing we're going to do is so this was produced in 2014. This little, which is 10 years ago. So this was marking the 200 years since the gospel arrived to Aotearoa. This is called Te Rongopai. It's a documentary DVD thing. And if you're interested, if you haven't, who's seen this? Anyone seen this? Cool, a few people. Okay, not many, so that's great. If you're interested in it, it's another resource. We're not going to watch the whole thing. We're going to watch a part of it soon. But it's another resource that can be good to be shown, and if you have a DVD player still these days. But yeah. Anyway, so the writer and the narrator of this information is he's a Presbyterian minister. He's also a historian and has been a long time lecturer and dean of studies and things at Laidlaw up north in Henderson. His name is Reverend Dr. Stuart Lang, and he interviews a number of other historians and Māori experts and ministers and Māori historians and things as part of it. And it just kind of reiterates a number of things that Aidan was just telling us and a few other things. So I thought it would be worth a watch just to kind of break up the media and then and put a little bit of reinforcement to some of the things he was saying and putting a few like visuals to what he was saying as well as a few other things. So this is part 2 called The Breakthrough. This picks up, we heard a little bit about the pre-treaty history of all, and this picks up sort of, just after, this is, well, I'll just play it.
However, things did start to look up for the CMS mission to New Zealand with the arrival of the Reverend Henry Williams, who in 1823 set up a new mission over here in Paihia.
The Reverend Henry Williams was a no-nonsense ex-naval captain, a former man of war, now committed to the gospel of peace. Maori knew Williams as Te Wirumu, or by his nickname Karuwha, 4 Eyes.
Williams became the leader of the Church Missionary Society in New Zealand. And he was based at the new mission station which he established at Paihia, which was down here on the strip of land between the sea and the hillside.
This is what the Paihia mission station looked like in 1827. And this is the scene at the Paihia mission station on the day in January 1826 when the mission launched its own ship, the 55-ton Herald. The painting was based on a sketch by Henry Williams' wife, Marion Williams. Williams dropped Marsden's approach of wanting to civilise Maori before converting them, and instead concentrated on directly communicating the Christian faith to Maori, especially through the use of the printed Maori Bible. As with most missionary wives, Marion Williams played a key role in the mission, in addition to caring for her family in a challenging context. She taught school, mentored many young Maori who lived with them, and frequently held the fort while her husband was away on mission trips elsewhere.
Williams was increasingly held by Maori in very high respect.
Henry Williams was a person respected by many of the tupuna of the day. and largely because I see him as a bridge builder, but also as a person to whom the Māori tūpuna trusted.
After William's death, 7 major tribes from around the country banded together to build a memorial to him in the churchyard at Paihia, with the words, 44 years a preacher of the gospel of peace, a father of the tribes. Henry Williams' role among Ngāpuhi is also honoured in Te Tii Marae at Waitangi by a carving of him and his Bible, and even with his spectacles.
William's the man with glasses and all. It's very unusual to see an image of a Pākehā in the carving in any meeting house.
Christian witness among Māori was strengthened in 1822 by the arrival of Wesleyan missionaries, who generally had good relationships with the CMS missionaries.
Their first mission station was at Kaio, near the Whangaroa harbour. In 1827, the mission at Kaio was abandoned after being attacked by Māori. But the next year, in 1828, the Wesleyans re-established themselves in New Zealand, at Manongu, in the Upper Hokianga.
Back in the Bay of Islands, some Māori nicknamed the mission station at Paihia as heaven and referred to the drunken debauched settlement of Kororaraka over the water, now known as Russell, as hell. Every year, thousands of sailors came ashore at Kororaraka, most of them not up to much good.
But in 1838, Catholic missionaries arrived, led by a bishop, Jean-Baptiste Pompallier, a Frenchman. They set up a mission right in Kororaraka. The Catholic mission at Kororaraka included the building now known as the Pompallier Mission, where there was a printing press producing literature in the Māori language. The Catholic missionary priests, having no wives and families to care for, were able to travel widely among Māori and to live among them.
The Catholics were regarded with great suspicion by the Protestant missionaries. The Protestants were referred to by the Catholics routinely as the heretics, and the Protestants, for their part, would refer to the Catholics by titles like the whores of Babylon. In the 1830s and 40s, there was a really big change. There began to be a widespread Māori response to the Christian faith. This was a really important turnaround, quite a dramatic development. This strong move towards Christianity began right here in the Bay of Islands and then gradually continued to the rest of the country. Large numbers of Māori became Christian and others adopted at least elements of Christian faith. Secular anthropologists are inclined to explain the Māori response as a case of cultural adaptation. However, Christians may be more inclined to relate it to the intrinsic appeal and power of the Christian message.
We should note, as part of the Māori response, the extremely strong attractiveness to Māori of literacy and the scriptures. Many Māori had become fascinated both with reading and writing, as well as with the content of the scriptures. Printed gospel portions were available from 1827 onwards, and the whole New Testament by 1837, and these were carried far and wide among Māori, by Māori, way ahead of the missionaries.
William Colenso established right here in Paihia a printing press for the Church Missionary Society, and from the beginning of 1835 it began to produce lots of Māori scriptures.
From the late 1820s, there's an extraordinary burst of interest in the Christian faith among Māori. Māori were reading, memorising words of scripture, debating what they meant. There's a growing fascination with the truths of the Christian faith.
Another very significant part of Christianity's appeal was the message of peace, a message that had become attractive to those very badly affected by intertribal warfare after the arrival of muskets. Around 20,000 Māori had been killed in the 1820s musket wars. Initially, to promote the message of peace, Williams and other missionaries would sometimes venture into the midst of battles and call for peace, sometimes successfully. Sometimes they would sail out with a war fleet, hoping to act as peacemakers.
In time, Māori really adopted the Christian message of peace for themselves. And the Christian teaching on loving and forgiving your enemy absolutely revolutionised intertribal relationships.
There's a very striking change evident among Māori people when the gospel begins to have an impact among them. There's a determination to act in ways that are not brutal or violent. There's a desire to seek peace. There's an abandonment of the principle of utu. There's a willingness to accept missionaries coming among them to bring peace. All these are remarkable changes from the behaviour of Māori back in the 1820s. This is the first and most striking evidence of the impact of Christianity.
While it was European missionaries who first brought the Christian gospel to Aotearoa, the stunning fact is that it was primarily Māori who then took the gospel to other Māori. Among the first to do so were former prisoners of war, slaves of Ngāpuhi, who up north had gone to mission schools, and there they'd learnt to read the scriptures. And then when Ngāpuhi released them, they went back to their own tribes and took with them the scriptures and the Christian message.
One such informal Maori missionary was Perepi Taumata Kura, a Ngāti Porou man who'd been captive of the Ngāpuhi and who'd attended mission schools in the Bay of Islands. He returned to his own Ngāti Porou people in the Waiapu Valley near East Cape. On New Year's Day 1834, and in his own way, he preached the first Christian message on the East Coast. Through him, large numbers of Ngāti Porou people began reading the scriptures and incorporating Christian beliefs and worship into their lives. In Poverty Bay, 3,000 Māori were persuaded to convert to Christianity by a man called Potoko.
In South Taranaki, among Ngāti Ruanui, a very large impact for Christian faith was made by a man called Wiramunira, who'd formerly been a prisoner of Ngāpuhi in the Hokianga, where he'd been under Wesleyan influence. A good example of how the Christian faith spread ahead of the missionaries is this story of Henry Williams, who in 1833 arrived at a little village in the Piako Valley, a place where no missionary had ever been before, and he decided to hold a Christian service. And he was rather surprised when the congregation there, of about 200 Māori, already knew the words of the hymn and all the words of the congregational responses. And then there's the story of Taurare, the daughter of Ngākuku, a Ngāti Hauwa chief in the Waikato. Ngākuku had converted to the Christian faith.
His daughter, Taurare, a young girl, had learned to read the Gospel of Luke from missionary Charlotte Brown at the CMS mission station near Matamatapa.
In 1836, at the age of 10 or 12, Taurare was killed by a raiding party from Rotorua. She was killed near Wairiri Falls in the Kaimai Ranges. A group of 21 Māori from the Matamata mission and one Pākehā missionary had camped at the foot of the ranges in preparation for going the next day over Tauranga. The old Māori trail went up the ridge to the right of the Wairiri Falls. The raiders from Rotorua, from further up the valley, saw the smoke of the cooking fire, and they crept through the night to the campsite here, and then just before daybreak they attacked. Everybody else managed to escape up into the bush, but Taurare was killed. Taurare's distraught father was urged to take utu, to seek revenge for his daughter's death. But instead, at her burial later that day, he spoke movingly of the need for Christian forgiveness. There lies my child. She has been murdered. Do not seek payment for her. God will do that. Let this be the finishing of the war with Rotorua. Now let peace be made. Turn to him.
Among the booty taken by the raiders was Ngākuku's copy of the Gospel of Luke. A few years later, back in Rotorua, Taurare's killer, Oita, became a Christian. He made the courageous decision to go and meet Taurare's father, Ngākuku, and to ask his forgiveness for the murder of his child. Ngākuku and Oita were reconciled. There was an interesting sequel to this story. It took place further south in the Kapiti area. A former slave of the Ngāpui, Matahau, but known up north as Ripahau, had been in mission schools in Paihi and Waimati and learnt to read and write there. Travelling through Rotorua, Matahau returned to his own Ngāti Raukawa people at Otaki on the Kapiti coast.
Matahau began teaching the scriptures and the Christian faith to Katu, the son of Te Raupraha, the great Ngāti Toa chief who had his stronghold on the island of Kapiti, and who from there went on expeditions to the South Island, conquering and killing a large number of Maori.
Matahau had with him only one book of scripture, but sent a message to Rotorua asking for more. After a while, what was left of Ngākuku's copy of the Gospel of Luke arrived from Rotorua, with Ngākuku's name still in it. Matahau gave it to Katu and to his cousin, Te Whiwhi. They both became Christian believers. Together, Katu and his cousin went on a passing ship up to meet with Henry Williams at Paihia and to urge him to send a resident missionary to the Kapiti area.
By the time missionary Octavius Hadfield arrived in 1839 to establish new mission stations at Waikanai and at Otaki, considerable numbers of Maori on the Kapiti area were already Christian believers, reading the Bible, keeping the Sabbath, gathering for worship. Katu and his cousin were both baptized, and Katu was given the new baptismal name of Tamihana. They were both recognized by the mission as Bible teachers. In 1842, Tamihana and his cousin also became missionaries to the South Island, preaching the gospel and the message of peace to their former enemies, the Ngāi Tahu, the same people that Tamihana's own father had formerly terrorized. Tamihana, on his missionary journeys, went as far south as Stewart Island. This is a photo of Tamihana much later in life.
Through this man, the connections with Ngākuku's Gospel of Luke now stretched from the Bay of Islands to the very bottom of New Zealand.
There were other Maori as well who took the gospel to former enemies. For instance, Manahira Te Potama and Kiriopa, men among the Ngāti Ruanui in the Hawera area, took the Christian message up to their enemies, Ngāti Tuwharetoa in the Taupo area. At Tukanu, they were martyred.
Ngāti Tuwharetoa then agreed to make peace and to welcome a Bible teacher from Ngāti Ruanui.
In 1846, a European traveller to the South Island's west coast recorded his impression that all the Maori of that area appeared to hold to the Christian faith, even though he understood that no European missionary had ever been there. The common thread in all of this is that it was predominantly Maori who took the Christian message across the length and breadth of Aotearoa, New Zealand.
By the mid-1840s, in response to Maori requests, the CMS, Wesleyans and Catholics had each established an extensive network of mission stations around the North Island and to a lesser extent in the South Island. The first mission station in the South Island was established by the Wesleyans at Waikoaiti. The mission stations helped consolidate Christianity among Maori, but the Pākehā missionaries freely acknowledged that Christianity would never have made such progress among Maori if it were not for Maori missionaries, leaders and Bible teachers. In the mid-1840s, it was estimated by a CMS-connected source, and perhaps overgenerously, that over 42,000 Maori were attending CMS church services, about 6,000 attending Wesleyan services, and about 5,000 Catholic services. The Maori population at that time was about 70,000.
In many places, including Waikanai, Otaki, Turanga and Poverty Bay, up near East Cape and at Matamata, Maori Christians constructed very large houses of worship, wharikarakia, places that were capable of accommodating up to 1,000 people.
This was the large church at Turanga, Poverty Bay. Notice the church building in this historic sketch of the Kenakena Pā and mission station at the mouth of the Waikanai River.
This was the large church building Rangiatea at Otaki, destroyed by fire in the mid-1990s. It was replaced by a replica.
Ko ahau te huarahi, te pono me te ora. Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life.
In the Waikato, There was the leading Ngāti Haua chief, Wiremu Tamihana, represented here by this teko teko in a meeting house, which shows him teaching from the Bible. In 1846, Tamihana founded a model Christian village near Matamata, with a strong Christian code of behaviour, a large church, a boarding school, a flour mill, and hundreds of acres of crops which supplied the market in Auckland. He called his village Perea, Maori for the biblical name Borea, a place where people eagerly studied the scriptures.
Peter, if I were to ask you the question, in 1850, which group in New Zealand was more conspicuously Christian, Maori or Pākehā, which group would you identify?
Oh, well, without any hesitation, I'd say Māori, because, again and again, you see that Māori are the ones who are fascinated and focusing on their faith.
Professor James Bellich writes that by the 1840s, Maori engagement with Christianity was real, deep and broad, and that by the 1850s, over 60% of Maori counted themselves as Christian.
The mid-19th century Maori response to Christianity is a bit of an embarrassment to some, both to secular-minded Pākehā and to some contemporary Maori. They tend to downplay it, or perhaps to try and explain it away. Go into some museums and you'll find little or no acknowledgement that there was a time in New Zealand's history when vast numbers of Maori embraced the Christian faith enthusiastically for themselves. The widespread Maori reception of the Christian faith from the 1830s onwards is a part of New Zealand's national history which needs to be acknowledged and perhaps reclaimed.
So there we go. A few more stories to be woven in, and it was nice to see some of the places and put the face to some things that not only Aidan was saying, but some things that you may have heard or not heard before. I think we're getting towards the end. Was anything that Aidan spoke about, or that was said in the video, that we'll just open the floor a little bit to a little bit of a kōrero. Anything that was stood out to you, or was a surprise, or resonated well with you? Was that boring?
I thought it was awesome, and just making to you for your knowledge and sharing, because
I just thought it was awesome. So just a big mihi to you for sharing with us. And I guess my question would be, how do we, all that knowledge you've got, how do we find it without doing a PhD ourselves?
It's a good question. I left out heaps of stories. There's a lot of reading you can do, or perhaps we could talk about something at... Is this your church here?
No.
Perhaps I could come and speak at your church, or maybe God's prompting you to start something at your church, to look into it a bit more. Yeah. Or maybe there are people at your church that are already passionate about this, but you don't know yet. So,
I'm sure there is.
Yeah. Keith Newman, a friend of mine. Can you hold up his books? Yeah.
What one?
Those two. Yeah. You can read these books, but they're really dense.
that's the problem.
Yes.
When you're storytelling, it's
Yeah.
easy to. But when you look at these books, it's like.
Yeah. So the best place to start is, what's the history of the place where your church is? What's the history of this land right here? And I probably could have gone into it, and I spoke for Jonathan a bit more, but this is the history of this area right here. When you got Ferry Road out here, why is it called Ferry Road? Well, it used to be where the boats... Yeah, sorry, I've lost my bearings. But
About Linwood Avenue.
Yeah, Linwood Avenue. Yeah, it's where the... Yeah. So knowing that history, so going into that, and you'll have people from your church that know those stories. And who are the people of your church? Like when I come in, I look in here, Oh, we've got all these here, got all the names of people, but where are the pictures of your founding members at your church and your, do you know what I mean? Have you got a book? Yeah, but this, yeah. So recording those stories, I did a bit of work with Reformed Church on Cornwall Street, and we had that conversation, talk to your people in your church, and they're like, oh, we just had a funeral yesterday. And I was like, yeah, there's a whole lot of stories that, not lost perhaps, but, well, that person's, you need to get those stories down. So your history of your church, the land, and go backwards from that. So Ashburton Christian School, we actually went and had a look at the land where that school was, and we actually went and paid, I think it was $15 to go back the last 3 purchases, and you see who owned it. And they have maps, and you see that in summer, there's this little green patch out the back of the rugby field, and you go back, oh, there was a stream there, and then there was a river. So there's all these stories there, and Littleton has amazing bookshops, and I go to the book barn down here, and yeah.
So the one book that's over there, Hula Can Go.
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah, really good.
There's an audio book of that in the Christchurch library that you can listen to.
This one would be a easier on-ramp than Keith Newman. Sure. Yeah.
Where did some of the, from the missionary point of view, where did things start to get compromised sometimes, and the missionaries perhaps weren't quite as squeaky clean as maybe when they first arrived, and therefore giving mixed messages and things getting a little haywire, and maybe their intent was good at the beginning, but then they had human interests that they wanted to also pursue for themselves. How do you blur that in?
Yes, great question. Marsden Cross, where I had my photo, and Stuart Longy was speaking, hugely isolated. The missionaries were out here. I feel for them. They were pretty much at the mercy of Māori looking after them. There were no roads. The only way in and out was by boat. Those missionaries, 1814, Hall, Kendall and King, their families, they were totally reliant on Māori looking after them. And the number of Māori there, they were interested in pretty much one thing: poo, getting muskets. Later, missionaries that came, in their ear was the settlers. We need land. We need land. We need land. Which is not surprising, because they've packed up and they've left England to never ever see their family again, and they've arrived here and they've got no land, or it's forested or whatever.
False promises.
Yeah, it's complicated. The Wakefields, everyone makes them out to be really bad guys, and they did do some bad stuff, but they were actually roots in the Quakers, and we've got a Quaker thing just off Ferry Road over here, for those of you who know. Things started to go a bit haywire when it was Māori were pushed to the edges, literally, of society, because land was needed for all those settlers who were arriving. And the settler government in 1852 weren't really interested in Māori. There were a whole lot of diseases that had come, and Māori didn't have resistance, and Māori were expected to just die out. And so, the message of the missionaries changed from being too Māori to the settlers that were arriving. They became the focus. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. When you read the history of Christian missions around the world, most successful missions seem to come in places where there was some kind of history of belief, some cultural connection that they said, this is our story that you're now telling us, and dressed up in different robes. The message of Jesus somehow connects with our own history. The Maori mission story is one of the most successful ever, and I'm wondering what we know of the points of connection between Maori belief and Christian belief.
Do you want to try and answer any of that?
I see you all rushing to the front area.
Can we just say, we were laughing before about the question, Bruce and I, about whether where it all went wrong between the missionaries and the Māori, and we were laughing because we said the Garden of Eden.
Yeah, as soon as you get humans involved, there's going to be mistakes made, whether they're Christian or not. All right. Just the first thing that popped into my mind, and I don't have any good answers, so I'm just going to give a response that was off the top of my head, was I noticed that many Native Americans also identified with the Christian story, but they identified the creator God of the Bible with the Great Spirit. They saw that as one and the same person, and that this was how he revealed himself to them previously. I know that some, not all, but some Māori now use, instead of te atua, some use io to connect to the stories that have been told here, that God and this God are the same. Now, I know that makes some people uncomfortable, but just deal with it. It's there, and it is the way some Māori Christians have chosen to identify God.
Because God was here before.
Yeah, because he didn't get off the boat with the missionaries. Yeah, that was.
So with the Maori anthem as well, A Ihoa is Jehovah God.
Yeah, if you didn't hear that point down the front there, just saying that in the national anthem says, what does it say? E Ihoa, which is Jehovah in Te Reo Māori.
I don't know whether I'm answering your question, but certainly God reveals himself, I think, in three real ways. And the Bible supports me in this. He reveals himself in creation. And then he does reveal himself in his Son, the Lord Jesus Christ. And then he does reveal himself, I believe, in the Old and New Testament. And so anybody that like Maori didn't have the Bible, but God does reveal himself in creation. And, all will be held, or God will judge people on that alone. So though Maori didn't have the written word, and boy, that was powerful when they read it, they were aware of a God. Yeah. The Bible then revealed him more. And their grasping for a God and seeing him creation, which really we all in this room have got to acknowledge, look at creation and think, wow, who made this? And so the Bible complements that, and God reveals himself more through that. And I think then they responded by the work of God's Spirit in their lives. So that may not have answered your question, but
So thanks for that. Yeah, I just want to share something that I found really fascinating and impactful, both from what Aidan was saying and from this video. It's just the heritage, the rich heritage of Christianity within tangata whenua, and instead of asking the question of where and how did it go wrong with the missionaries, where and how did it go wrong with just the church? Where are all the Māori Christians now? Why have we lost the story of our Christian connection between Pākehā Christian, Western Christians, and the Māori Christians and the gospel that ties us together? And seeing the history, seeing a carving of Henry Williams reading a Bible, teaching the Bible, even with his glasses on, in the whare. Like, that's a powerful thing. And seeing, just makes me wonder when we lost that connection. And I feel like we have a responsibility as the church today to reclaim that. And part of that reclaiming that is honoring the culture, honoring, and recognizing and honoring what, where we've gone wrong, and how we can reconcile those bridges because we are uniquely woven in this land. And I think that that's just a very powerful thing, and I just want to share that as we're going to close, I guess, tonight. We're off next week, and then we'll gather back again for session 3 on week 4 of February, if that makes sense. In this off week, if you're interested, my team will know this, but I host a podcast called the Honest Theology Podcast, and in season 1, I did an episode on Jesus and biculturalism with Donald Scott, who some of you might know. He was formerly at North City. And it's just, if you want something to listen to during next Thursday and you're not here, give that a listen if you're interested. And I think, and that'll, I don't know, just something to do if you want to. What time? What?
The podcast.
Oh, just on your own time.
What's the name of the podcast?
It's called the Honest Theology Podcast. Honest Theology Podcast. It's on anything you want to stream it on. Go back to all the way to season 1. I think it's like episode 6 maybe or something. But you'll find it. Jesus and Biculturalism is the title. And that's just if you want to do something next week, it's because we're not meeting here. Dallas, you want to?
Yeah. So we were going to, we're kind of like building this plane as we're flying it. So we were going, or is it the other way around? You get it. We were going to look a little bit into the Declaration of Independence, but we will do that because actually that is more foundational and almost more of an important document than what the Treaty of Waitangi is, some would say. And yet most of New Zealanders don't necessarily know a whole lot about it. So we are going to talk a little bit about the Declaration of Independence next time, and then obviously the treaty. And then we're going to look at the impacts of colonisation as well. So again, that's in 2 weeks' time. And when we talk about the impacts of colonisation, we might touch on a little bit about how we went from in the 1800s, the biggest revival New Zealand has ever seen, Māori to Māori, to now, I don't even know the percentage, but it's very small, of how many Māori Christians, how many Māori believers there are in New Zealand. So what happened? Yeah. What actually happened there? A lot happened there. So, and again, we're only going to touch on this much of a much bigger story, but that's what we're going to do next time. I know, just to touch on that, it's 9 o'clock. In a lot of Māori circles now, Christianity is only equated with colonisation. That's all Christianity brought. It was not good news at all. And so a lot of Māori associate Christianity with land grabbing, pretty much, and oppression and injustice and so many other things. So we're going to dive a little bit into that next time. In 2 weeks' time, bring something of value to you. We might get some comms out about that just to remind you all, but in some way, shape or form.
Where's the thing? Did the thing go around?
Where's the thing? Just while Jono's doing that, can we get the
If you didn't put your name and email on the clipboard, if you did, then we will send out to you last week's link and tonight's link and other information.
Oh, there we go.
Right.
Sweet. So if you haven't done already, put your name, email address on there. But yeah, in 2 weeks' time, bring something of value to you that's small, okay? And we're gonna do a little exercise.
We'll remind you to do that as well.
We will. Okay. So we're gonna end in a karakia that's gonna go up on the screen very soon, and it was the same karakia that we did last week. Where is it in the Bible? Kia tau. In Corinthians. I could just do it. Oh, there we go. Eventually it's going to come up. All right, here we go again, whānau. So we're going to say the words in bold together. Ka pai, karakia whakamutunga, toru wha. Kia tau, kia tātou katoa, te atawhai o tō tātou āriki, a ihu karaiti, me te aroha o te atua, me te whiwhinga tahitanga, ki te wairua tapu, ake, amen.